So here we are. Welcome everyone to the PhD defense of Thibault today. I'm Mathias Poulin. I'm the president of this committee, and we are pleased to welcome you in Toulouse, even remotely, shortly. And Thibault will present his thesis in front of the committee composed by as reviewers Julie Digne, that is a researcher in the CNRS University of Lyon, Marc Alexa, professor in the University of Berlin in Germany, and as examiner Mathieu Lebrun, professor at Caltech in USA, and here in Toulouse, Nicolas Melado, who was a PhD advisor of Thibault, and Loic Bart, who was the co-advisor, and myself as president. So now, Thibault, you have 45 minutes to present your work.
Okay, thank you. Welcome everyone for my thesis defense on multi-scale point cloud analysis. I did this thesis at IRIT at the University of Toulouse with the supervision of Loic Bart and Nicolas Melado. So I'm going first to introduce the context of the thesis, which is the 3D acquisition. So the main goal of 3D acquisition is to obtain virtual copies of physical objects in order to process them easily. And for that, there exist now mature technologies and devices that are able to scan a wide range of objects from a very small molecular structure to entire cities. So 3D acquisition is used for many application domains. And between the acquisition and the applications, there is the geometry processing pipeline that transforms the raw acquired data into usable 3D models. So my thesis takes place at the early stage of this geometry processing pipeline, where we have to deal with 3D point clouds. So 3D point clouds are defined by a discrete set of 3D coordinates that sample the surface of the object that is being scanned, as we can see on the bottom with this chart. So it's difficult to work directly with this kind of 3D data because there is usually a lot of acquisition artifacts like noise and outliers. The data is massive because we are now able to easily obtain millions of points. And more importantly, point clouds are unstructured. If we look at the bottom right here, we can see that the points have no specific organization. And unlike the grid of pixels of the image on the left, point clouds lack of spatial parameterization. So it's difficult to directly use standard signal processing tools like the Fourier transform, for instance. So the goal of my thesis was to find structures in point clouds in order to make further processing steps easier. And for that, we perform geometric pattern recognition in point clouds in order to abstract the shape by a set of simple geometric primitives. And as we can see on the set of images here, the objects that we use to scan can be pertinently described by planes, cylinders, and curves. So in my thesis, I propose different algorithms to detect such a geometric feature and to segment the point clouds accordingly. I also propose an experimental algorithm in order to parameterize the point sample surface in order to obtain a direct mapping between a 2D domain and the 3D points. In my thesis, I focus on one important notion about the point clouds, which is the notion of scale. And to illustrate this concept, I'm asking at what shape this red point belongs to. So from a far point of view, we could say that this red point on the church belongs to the roof of the church. So it corresponds to a large blue planar shape like this at the center. But if we look closer to this point, we start to see details appearing. And we could also say that this point belongs to one tiles of the roof, which corresponds to this small planar shape in green. So which of these two answers is correct? In my thesis, I answer that they are both valid. It only depends on the observation scale. So it means that one point can belong to different geometric features at different scales. And we also have the intuition that a feature that will be detected at many scales will be probably more pertinent than a feature that is detected at only one scale. And this persistence with respect to scale will play an important role in our algorithms. So the goal of the thesis is to take into account this notion of scale. So in this presentation, I will start with state-of-the-art on point-based geometry processing. Then I will introduce my different contributions. I will start with results on multi-scale differential analysis in order to locally characterize the surface that is sampled. Then I will propose a plane detection algorithm using the analysis of persistence in a multi-scale approach. The third part will be dedicated to curve and cylinder detection using curvature lines. And in the fourth part, I will present an ongoing work on point cloud parametrization. I'll end with a conclusion on some perspectives. So in this state of the art, I'm going to review different domains. I will start with point cloud parametrization and geometric pattern recognition. And then I will quickly review methods to analyze the shape at multiple scale and to locally approximate a surface from point clouds. So to parameterize the point cloud, there exist a few methods that avoid the need of a triangular mesh. And these methods are usually dedicated to either clean point clouds that sample quite simple shape, or they involve large systems that are difficult to solve for point cloud that reach millions of points. Geometric flows are other approaches where we let the surface evolve and eventually converge toward a 2D domain. And for point cloud processing, there exists an implementation of the mean curvature flow, as proposed by Julie and her colleagues. But this method can be long to converge, and if it converges, it's not necessarily on 2D. To detect planes and cylinders in point clouds, there exist many methods that fit simple primitives to point clouds. We can name region growing, Ransack, and the Hood transform, for instance. Other methods focus on the interrelations between these primitives in order to extract higher level structures, such as globe fit and raptor. But for this method, it's difficult to control precisely the scale of analysis. There is one method that has been recently introduced by Feng and his colleagues that is a multi-scale approach and that extracts planes at what they call structural scales. And to define these structural scales, they use machine learning. So there is no explicit definition of what a scale is. For feature curves detection, there exist many different definitions of feature curves, such as sharp edges, crest and valley lines, lines of curvatures, and different contours definition in the context of rendering. But in overall, there is few multi-scale approach that can process unstructured point clouds. So now to analyze 3D shape at multiple scale, there is mainly two different approaches. Decomposition methods separate the input shape in different frequencies. And it's usually done by the eigendecomposition of the Laplace operator. So in this case, the scale is defined by the eigenvalue of the decomposition. So it's not a really intuitive definition of scale because it's difficult to link it to some precise geometric meaning. And in addition, the eigendecomposition is usually done globally for the whole point clouds, which start to be costly for large point clouds. Differently, smoothing methods work locally and define the scale by the size of weighting kernel support. So the scale space theory in computer vision is one example, which has been adapted to 3D by Marc Poli and Nicolas Melado and their colleagues. So these methods are local, so more efficient, and the scale is intuitive since it's a distance in the ambient space we want to analyze. So in the thesis, I adapt this kind of approach. Now to estimate a surface from scattered points, there is also mainly three different approaches. The covariance analysis is a widely used method. So it's a linear principal component analysis that fits a plane to the points. And the eigenvalues of the PCA are usually used as a shape descriptor. So it's a very fast method. But it has been shown by Helmut Pottmann and his colleagues that the eigenvalues are asymptotically not related to any properties of the surface like curvatures. A second family of approaches estimates the coefficient of Taylor approximations of the surface. So we can name oscillating jets and more recently the wave jets. So we can obtain arbitrary high orders of the derivatives of the surface, but at the cost of a slower system to solve. And finally, there are the point set surfaces introduced by Mark Alexa and his colleagues that use the moving least squares regression in order to approximate a smooth manifold from the points as the stationary point of a projection operator. And depending on the definition of this projection operator, we obtain different definition of point set surfaces. And in my thesis, I based my work on the algebraic point set surfaces, as proposed by Gaël Guenogo and his colleagues, that fit an algebraic sphere to the points. And this algebraic sphere is defined by this quadratic scalar field F, given in equation here, and defined by three parameters, UC, UL, and UQ. As we can see on the right, also it's a sphere. The algebraic sphere smoothly changes to a planar configuration if the quadratic parameter UQ is equal to 0. So I recall that the scale here is defined by the radius of the neighborhood that we use to fit the algebraic sphere. So it's denoted by T in this presentation. And the great advantage of APSS is the existence of a closed form solution of the regression of the algebraic sphere to oriented points. And this is given by these equations here for UQ, UL, and UC. So evaluating the APSS is fast. It's also compact in memory. And we can perform any mathematical analysis of these analytical equations. So now the question is how to locally characterize the surface of the APSS, and more precisely, how to estimate its mean curvature. And since the algebraic sphere is an isotropic shape, how to also estimate the principal curvatures of the surface. And how to do it efficiently, especially at high scales, when the radius of the neighborhood reaches very large values. So I'm going to answer these different questions in this first part on multi-scale differential analysis of point clouds in order to locally characterize the point clouds. So a standard way to estimate the mean curvature from the APSS is to use the inverse radius of the algebraic sphere, which is given by h hat in this small equation at the top left here. And the question is it a pertinent estimator or not? And to verify that, we performed an asymptotic analysis of the algebraic sphere regression in order to obtain this theorem that links the parameter of the sphere, UQ, UL, and UC, to differential properties of the surface. And we have the following results. So the quadratic parameter UQ is related to the mean curvature H of the surface. The linear parameter UL is linked to H squared minus K, which is related to the squared difference of curvature. So it defines some kind of anisotropy measure of the surface. And finally, the constant parameters UC involves a combination of HK and also delta H, which is the Bielaplacian of the surface, and that involve order fourth derivatives. So if we take now the mean curvature estimator H hat as the inverse radius of the algebraic sphere, we obtain up to a sign convention the true mean curvature of the surface. So the estimator asymptotically converge toward the true value of the mean curvature. And to illustrate these parameters UQ, UL, and UC, I show them on these point clouds, where on the left we can see that UQ, that is related to the mean curvature of the surface, highlights well curved region of the point clouds, in red for positive values, in blue for negative ones, and in white near zero curvature. At the center, we can see that the norm of UL that defines this anisotropy measure highlight anisotropic parts like the nose or the neck here, for instance, or the eye if we look closer. And finally, the constant parameter that involves higher order derivatives highlight the local relief of the surface, as we can see on the right. Now, to compute the principal curvatures from the APSS, we must compute the shape operator W of the implicit surface. So this shape operator involves the Hessian matrix of the scalar field at the numerator and the gradient of the scalar field at the denominator. So we must compute these two elements in order to get the shape operator and then the principal curvatures. So to differentiate this scalar field F, defined with the parameters U, one first option is to consider these parameters U as constant. So I called it partial differentiation. And we obtain a first version of the shape operator as proposed together with the APSS in its original form. But since we have an analytical solution of the algebraic sphere parameters, we could take into account this dependence in order to complete what I call the complete differentiation. And this is proposed by Nicolas Mellado and his colleagues, where they perform one complete differentiation first to get the gradient and one partial differentiation to get the Hessian matrix. So it gives us a second version of the shape operator. And differently, what I propose is to perform twice the complete differentiation to get the gradient and then the complete Hessian matrix. So here we take completely into account the dependence of the algebraic sphere to the spatial parameter X. So we get this third new Hessian matrix and the shape operator. And we end up with what I call complete principal curvatures of the APSS. Now, how to do it at multiple scale, how to estimate this curvature at multiple scale. So I recall that the scale is the neighborhood radius used to locally fit the algebraic sphere at each point. So we define the minimal scale T-min as related to the local point spacing of the point cloud, and the maximal scale Tmax related to the bounding block size of the whole point cloud. And then we sample discrete values Tj of m values of scale between T-min and Tmax. And the problem arises when Tj reach values near Tmax, where we have large neighborhood to consider, which is very slow to get. Even though we use accelerating structure like a Cadet tree, it is very inefficient. So we must decimate the point cloud as measured as the scale grows. And for that, we propose to perform Poisson-Dix subsampling at each level of scale. So the advantage of Poisson-Dix sampling is that we can relate the amount of decimation with the scale, Tj. And to do that, we set the Poisson-Dix radius Rj as a factor of the scale Tj. So this factor alpha is set usually to 0.1 in all our experiments. So this multi-resolution representation allows us to have an efficient multi-scale representation. So I'm going to present you some results. First about the principal curvature direction, the principal curvatures estimation. So we perform an evaluation of these estimations against related methods of the state of the art on this three-point cloud sampling a sphere, a cylinder, and a saddle surface. And these point clouds were perturbed by different kind of noise and position and on normals with different amounts of noise. And on average, with our third shape operator, we obtain the least errors in terms of mean curvature estimation and principal curvature estimation. Thanks to the multi-resolution representations that we can see here, we can have a multi-scale representation at the top here at 3 different scales in about 40 seconds for 1 million points and 50 scales. So these two tools, the principal curvatures and the efficient multi-scale representation, will be used in all the following work. So now I'm going to detail the second part on the detection of planes in point clouds using the analysis of persistence. So I'm going to illustrate the main ideas of this part with this continuous curve at the top left here, and with its curvature scale space here in this diagram. So here we show the curvature of this curve at any point along the curve in abscissa and for any level of scale in ordinates. So we can observe different regions in this scale space curvature that share the same differential properties. So we kind of have this kind of configurations with 3 different level of scale. If I look at the lowest scale, for instance, we have many regions that alternate between negative and positive curvature. And if we look at on the original curve, it actually corresponds to the small scale oscillation of the curve. At a medium scale, for instance, we have wider region that share the same curvature, and that corresponds to the medium scale, well, the main oscillation of the curve. And finally, at the highest scale here at the top, we have only one region with 0 curvature, which corresponds to a linear approximation of the curve. So the idea of this part is to detect such stabilities in scale space in order to extract a pertinent feature from the point clouds. So to do that on unstructured data such as point clouds, so to detect these persistent and stable regions in scale space, we will first propose to segment the input data at any level of scale, as we can see in the center here, and we obtain different regions that are uncorrelated. So in the second step, we propose to link them in scale in order to obtain the regions that we are interested in. And this, in this case, will represent meaningful planar shapes of the point cloud. So we propose the following pipeline, where we take as input the multi-scale representation I presented just before, at 50 level of scales here. Then we will perform planar segmentations at any level of scale. And we will represent all of this segmentation in a graph. In this graph, we will extract what we will call components, on which we will perform the analysis of persistence. So I'm going now to give some details on the segmentations and graph first, and then on the component extraction and on the persistence analysis. So for the segmentations, we use a planar seeded region drawing with a criteria on curvatures and normals that we compute thanks to our shape operator. And we remove the regions that are smaller than the current scale, since they correspond to noise at these scales. And this will correspond to this black region over the point cloud. We perform these segmentations at all the 50 scales. And we represent each of this level of scale in a level of hierarchical graph, where each region of the point cloud in the segmentations will correspond to one node in the graph. So we obtain a large graph, and the goal here is to extract from this graph some similarities across scales. So for instance, this green region here, this red one and this purple one that occur at different scale actually corresponds to the same feature, which is the top of this triangular part here. So we will encode similarities between regions in the edges of the graph. To compute the similarity between two regions, we use the Jacquard index, which is defined by the intersection over the union. So it's a scalar value between 0 and 1, where 1 means that the two regions share exactly the same points. So this is a combinatorial measure that doesn't take into account the geometry, so it's very fast to compute, and it's very generic. We then remove the edges if this Jacquard index is below 0.5, and we obtain this more structured graph, where colors now have a precise meaning. Each connected component of this graph has its own color. So if we take, for instance, this green connected components here, and if we take the union of all of these regions, we obtain this planar shape on the point cloud. So in this graph, we have many components. So the goal now is to sort them to get the more meaningful one. For that, we define the birth and death of a component as the lowest scale and highest scale these components appear and disappear. And the persistence of a component will be defined by the difference between the death and the birth. So each component, like our green one, can be represented by a 2D point on the so-called persistence diagram, where we put the birth of the component as abscissa and the death of the component as ordinate. So the green component that starts at the first level of scale here and that ends in this level of scale is located in this part. For instance, the most persistent component in this example is this blue one here that actually corresponds to the whole point cloud, so a planar approximation of the shape. And if we take, for instance, an imaginary point on the diagonal, it will correspond to a component that appear at one scale and disappear at the next scale. So it will correspond to noise, which is the main idea of persistence diagram, is to consider points near the diagonal as noise and points in the top left corner on this diagram as a meaningful feature. So we have a nice representation where we can easily separate noise from features. So I'm going to show you some results. Here with this synthetic example, we show 3 different thresholds on the persistence. So if we take the lowest threshold A in this diagram, we can see that we discard only a few components that actually corresponds to the size of the small steps here. And at the highest persistence level C, here we obtain only the mostly planar shape of the point cloud. Here below, we have a real-world example where we can see that we have more components, especially near the diagonal, that corresponds to noise and that we can easily filter. So at the highest scale, the highest persistence threshold C, for instance, on the right, we can obtain the main walls of the church. So we can do many more things with this diagram. We can also filter by scale and ask for the most persistent components in a given range of scale. And here I show you 4 different scale thresholds, from a small threshold to the highest threshold on the right. On the left, on a small scale threshold, we can highlight the small tiles of the church, while at the highest threshold, we only obtain the mostly planar component of the point cloud. So it takes around 6 minutes for 1 million points on 50 scales, but this can be pre-computed in order to perform more interactive applications, as we proposed in the thesis. We can also use our planar configuration as input for polygonal reconstruction algorithms to obtain different meshes at a different level of scale, as shown here. Now I'm going to present you the curve and cylinder detection using curvature lines. So cylinders and curves are quite different. Cylinders are defined by smooth region over the shape, as illustrated in green here, while feature curves are more salient region, as in red on the right. But they share one common aspect, since they are defined by one favored direction. So if we take 1 point on these different features, we can easily define one principal curvature direction. So the idea of this part is to exploit this idea. We will first generate minimal curvature lines in blue here over the shape. And then we propose 2 different pipelines to extract cylindrical regions and feature curves. So I'm going to start to give some details on minimal curvature lines during generation. And then I will give some details on the different pipelines. So the lines of curvatures are defined by the integral line of the minimal curvature directions field, and we represent them as 3D polylines, as done in several previous work. To generate them, we proposed what I call the modified Euler scheme. So it's a standard Euler scheme where we advance along the minimal curvature direction Vmin by a step length delta. And once we've done that, we project these points using the IPSS projection operator phi in order in order to keep the lines on the surface. So the minimal curvature direction Vmin can be computed using our shape operator, and this could be done at any level of scale. So we end up with multi-scale curvature lines direction over unstructured point clouds. Now we propose, based on this feature line, on these minimal curvature lines, we propose an algorithm to detect feature curves on point clouds in the context of a contest. We first filter the minimal curvature lines in order to obtain the most salient ones. And for that, we have a criteria on the maximal principal curvature direction. So we obtain salient lines that are classified as concave or convex, depending on the sign of the maximal principal curvature direction. Then we propose a voting system so that each vertices of salient lines give a signed vote to its neighboring points in the original point clouds. And we do that at all scales so that we have a robust voting approach. And based on these votes, we finally obtain individual feature curves on the input shape using region drawing over the point cloud. For the cylinder detection, we propose a slightly different pipeline, also based on the minimal curvature lines. We first filter these minimal curvature lines to obtain the most regular lines. And for that, we have a threshold on the length of the line, of the total curvature, and on the geometric variation that measure the stability of these lines with respect to the scale. Then we compute locally on each point of the input point clouds an anisotropy measure that measures the anisotropy of the regular lines locally to each point. And for that, we perform a covariance analysis of the neighboring lines, and we use a standard anisotropy measure. And finally, we segment the final cylindrical region using also region drawing over the shape. And here we have different thresholds on the anisotropy we computed and on the directions of the lines. And this pipeline can be performed at any level of scale. So we have a multi-scale cylinder detection algorithm. I'm going to show you some results. So we tested our cylinder algorithm on this point cloud that sampled the surface of an engine. And this engine, as we can see, is made of many tubular parts. On the bottom, we can see different segmentations using different level of scale. At a small scale, for instance, we can see that we have different regions near this large pipe that at a high scale start to be only one region. And the same applies for these 4 tubular parts here at the bottom right that are individual region at small scale and that start to merge together here with this pink region when the scale grows. For the feature curves detection, we were able to handle a large variety of feature curves on different input shape, and we can handle a very salient line like on this model or a smoother one here. And this is thanks to this robust multi-scale voting approach. In the contest, we were evaluated against different other methods using a manually annotated ground truth dataset. And we obtain the least errors in terms of Hausdorff distances between the curves we detected and the curves manually labeled by computer scientists. So, which means that our method is precise enough, and we can process in about 10 seconds 1 million points. And here we use 5 scales only. In this fourth part, I'm going to present you some preliminary results on point cloud parametrization. So the idea of this, what I call scale space parametrization, is to progressively grow the scale and iteratively update the points on the algebraic point state surfaces, so that each input point cloud here progressively flow toward a 2D domain. So thanks to the algebraic sphere fitting used by the APSS, we can converge toward either a sphere, as in the bottom, or a plane. And this convergence on a 2D domain gives us naturally a parametrization of the input point cloud. So with our approach, we are able to automatically handle spherical and planar parametrizations without setting any specific parameter. We don't have to detect boundaries first. They are implicitly handled by the PSS. And we use only local computations so that the method in overall stay relatively fast. So we are able here to handle only Genius 0 surface, and we have no guarantee on bijectivity, for instance, or on the minimization of any distortion measure. So it's only a preliminary work, but we propose a way to measure the distortion induced by this parametrization. Here, the idea behind the meshless distortion measure we propose is to compare a neighborhood in 3D, represented in blue here, around one 3D point, P, and we will compare it to the same neighborhood, but on the flattened version of the points, around the corresponding point U. So an ideal parametrization would preserve the shape of this neighborhood. So to measure the distortions, we propose to perform covariance analysis on the tangent plane in 3D and in the 2D parameter space. So we have two covariance analyses that give us two ellipses that we can compare. So we will compare the area of these ellipses and the anisotropy. So we propose two different distortion measures. The first one measures the angular distortion, is the conformal distortion measure that is defined by the ratio between the anisotropy of the two ellipses. And we also propose an ottalic distortion measure that measures the distortion in terms of area, defined by the ratio between the area of the two ellipses. So for instance, if the distortion, if the ottalic distortion is equal to 2 for 1 point, for instance, it will mean that there is a factor 2 between the area of the two ellipses, meaning that the neighborhood has been stretched or compressed by a factor 2. So here are some results on different point clouds. Here I show several point clouds with their flattened version. At the top, we can see that mostly planar point clouds obviously converge toward the planar domain. And at the bottom, we can see that buildings or statues usually converge toward the sphere. Here I show the distortions measured at any point on this point cloud that sample the stairs here in 3D, and its flattened version that we can see here. So here I show the angular and areal distortion of this parametrization. And since we are comparing neighborhoods between the 3D and the 2D, we can set the size of this neighborhood arbitrary. So we have a multi-scale distortion measure. So in blue, these distortions are equal to 1, meaning that there is no distortion, while in red, we have a high distortion. So what we can see is that at high scale, we are comparing almost all the point cloud with its 3D version, so there is a few distortions. So to conclude, I will summarize my thesis by saying that we propose to give structure to unstructured point clouds, and we do that with using geometric patterns and parametrization. So we always propose a multi-scale approach with an intuitive scale parameter, and this allows us to consider features of various size, which is very important for point clouds that are very complex nowadays. We also propose the persistence tools in scale space in order to pertinently separate noise from features. And finally, we also propose the different fundamental characterization of surface that are accurate and robust, and that are efficient thanks to our multi-resolution representation. They are also pertinent in the sense that the mean curvature, for instance, asymptotically converge toward the true mean curvature of the surface. And all of this allows us to process real acquisition data that are complex to process in practice. For future work, we have several perspectives in mind. An obvious perspective is to try to unify all of the different algorithms that we proposed to detect jointly planar parts, but cylinders and curves together. We can also try to detect more complex patterns, like repetitive patterns, as we can see here, or small 3D textures over point clouds. So for that, we are also experimenting to use deep learning. So this is a work under review, where we basically take the local characterization we proposed at multiple scale, so that we have a one-dimensional multi-channel signal that we can give to a network that is able here to quickly learn and classify sharp edges and point clouds. The lines we generate at multiple scale can also be structures that could help different geometry processing tasks, like shape matching, registration, or retrieval, for instance. We are also working on the algebraic sphere fit and more precisely on the stability analysis of this regression in order to evaluate its robustness to noise theoretically. And finally, we are wondering if all the tools we propose to analyze the differential properties of surface could be applied also in higher dimensions, where the point clouds sample a low manifold in high dimensions. And we were wondering if our methods could give some efficiency and robustness to what already exists in this information geometry domains. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you for this presentation. When we will speak in the jury, please turn off your video so that there is no mercy.
Okay.
And it's time now for the discussion. And first, the reviewers will ask questions, and we will answer all the questions they ask. Then the examiners, and finally the editors. So I propose to commence by Julie D for the first questions, then Mark Alexa, and if you think we have to do several turn of questions, it will be possible. Julie.
Okay. Can you hear me well?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So first of all, I'd like to thank you for this very nice presentation. And it was very clear and it's a very good defense. That's that. Of course, I have a few questions. I start with some questions on a part which I was puzzled about. You have a very, very, very nice definition of illusion preparator, and you have this very beautiful mathematical analysis. And then you somehow, when you change scale in your scale space, you subsample the concept in a way which is completely oblivious of curvatures. Just use Poisson something, and somehow you don't with a fixed disk size, without taking into account the fact that if there is a curved area of the surface, you're likely to want to preserve more points throughout the scale space. And it's not necessarily time when you're in the thesis in the work where you have a way of dealing with the sampling which is a little maybe below what we would expect. For example, when you do this Japan index for density and for this for measuring the area, the overlapping area between the parts in your persistence diagram, you're just counting the number of points which are common to both areas, instead of having something which is maybe more density dependent, because if you have a high, you know that very well for point clouds, density is variable a lot. And if you have densities that are varying, then this index will not account for the same thing depending on the place where you're computing it on the surface. So can you tell us more about these choices of basically just not considering curvatures or
yeah. Yes, so I'm going to answer. Okay, I hope you are hearing me well. So for the subsampling, we choose to, we don't take into account any curvature information. The goal was to be as general as possible without favoring any specific parts of the point clouds. What I could say also is that at low scale, we still preserve well the sharp feature, for instance, where it's highly curved, because we have a lot of points here. So at low scale, it's not really a problem. Then when the scale grows, indeed, we don't take into account the curvatures in the sampling. But after all, we are not always interested in curved region. We are also interested in flat regions. So it was a way to take into account kind of everything. It's a bit naive, but and the important goals were also to link the decimation with the scale, to don't obtain a very subsample point cloud or highly sampled point cloud, to stay relatively fast, but to have an accurate algebraic point surfaces. So the Poisson sampling was to scatter the points in the most regular way, without introducing any gas. For the similarity measure between regions, we also don't take into account the density or the curvatures of any geometric meanings. It was also to be as generic as possible, to have something very fast to implement and that work well in practice. And it can be extended to any kind of region. It's only combinatorial, so yeah, the genericity was a first goal for these measures. In practice, also, if we have I don't know, very varying sampling, again, since we are working in different scales, maybe at low scale, near regions where there is few samples, we won't be able to have meaningful features. But at a higher scale, we will be able to process them. So the multi-scale approach kind of help for varying sampling and so on. I can say that.
Agreed, but the fact is that we are doing Poisson sampling, we do it in the ambient space. And it's an approximation of, it's a local approximation that the ambient space, the local ambient distances are equal to the geodesic distances, or a good approximation of the geodesic distances. And this only holds, if if you have more or less flat paths. Otherwise, there's an impact on your estimation, in your later estimation of the curvature, since you have not enough points in the curved areas to have meaningful algebraic sphere regression. So I was wondering if you noticed any artifacts coming from this sampling.
Not really in practice. Maybe the issue is when we have very sheets of surface that are very close together. We can have some problems, but it's not really due to the sampling in ambient space. It's more a problem like the algebraic sphere. We don't know what is the surface exactly. Yeah, but also I did not mention in the presentation, but we use sometimes we use a robust version of the APSS, which kind of help also when there is low points, even though it's highly curved. The APSS work well in practice. It's quite robust, so no specific problems about that.
Yes. I have another question on your second chapter is the presentation of the persistent diagram, the multi-scale and expression, which is very nice. And I'd like to know a little more, because once again you're using this picture, and I understand why, because you developed it and it works well and it's very helpful. But since you're doing basically region drawing as a preliminary naive planar area abstraction, did you try basically the brain is prone to a lot of errors, especially if you're operating in a region brain with respect to the normals are not very well, it's not very it's a naive way of doing planar abstraction. So I was wondering whether you detected some even more naive version of planar area abstraction. Because my intuition is that persistence is so good at extracting and detecting structures that even if you do something which is the least, the worst baseline ever, we have decent results after the persistent diagram extraction. And yeah, so I like your inputs on this time.
Yeah, I'm actually the segmentations, the planar segmentations we propose are kind of naive already. I don't think of a more naive way, but yeah, it's true that when we perform these segmentations, so here it's a simple point cloud, but it's really noisy. We have a lot of regions. The filtering by scale is an important part of it, because otherwise we have many small regions. But since they are smaller than the scale, we know that it's a feature that doesn't count at this scale. So it's an important step. I think we could employ different planar segmentations at this step, as long as we have one parameter to describe the scale and to have such stack of segmentations. It's true that the segmentation is not the key part of it. We could maybe use Ransack or things like that. As long as we have different segmentations that we can link together after with the graph and so on, it could work also. So, and that's the future work we have in mind to use also other segmentations than planar ones. We could integrate spheres and cylinders, for instance. Then the analysis will change after, but yeah, the segmentation could be changeable, I think, without no problem.
So you're using these the plane instructions to detect similarities between parts of the surface. Can you tell us more as to how you would use this similarity and how would you use it?
Yeah, so the similarity tool we proposed, yeah. So there is the similarity between regions in the graph. We also proposed a way to explore this persistence diagram and to eventually select one region of the point cloud and get the similar regions at other places. And we do that by comparing actually a birth and death level of components. We also observe that usually the related parts of a point cloud, also they are very distant, usually share the same persistence and the same birth and death levels. So the persistence tools was to, so it was an interactive tool to first select a region, then select a second region of interest, where we look for components that are equivalent in terms of persistence. We also we can also filter the planes so that we have the same orientations and so on. But yeah, we can. I think we can do many more things with this representation. So it's on 2D, so it's very simple to compare points and so on. So it was the main idea of this these interactive tools.
And last question maybe is it for your last chapter on characterization? So there's something I didn't quite get, and maybe you can just clarify that for me. It's how you get from the parameterization of, because you have something at each step. So how did you get the parameterization for the whole initial concept with when you had converged to plane or sphere by substability, you just had a subset of the
yeah, maybe I was not clear enough in the presentation on the thesis, but we sample at each scale the point cloud that is used to compute the algebraic point set surfaces. But we compute the APSS at each original point of the point cloud. And this is illustrated here at 3 levels of scales here. We have a 3 subsample version of the point clouds that is used to compute the algebraic point set surfaces, but on all of the points that we have initially. So when I grow the scale and iteratively project the points to converge toward the parameter domain, it's all the points that converge toward the parameter domain. So we have in parallel the subsamples and so on, but we process all the initial points.
And for the last part, I also have a small remark, because you're saying that there are very few point set parameterization techniques, which is true. But there are some techniques of dimension reduction, like we are embedding and so on, which can be tweaked into the parameterization more or less of point sets, because it would require any mesh and they can be applied like that. So, if you have time to consider that?
Yeah, it's true. There is many methods for dimensionality reduction. So we could reduce a 3D point cloud to a 2D point cloud with this kind of methods. But usually they still involve to consider the point cloud as a whole. There is, I don't have in mind all the names of the methods, but they sometimes perform spectral decomposition or things like that. Or they optimize some systems. So it's very costly for very large point clouds. So, but we could test them in order maybe to compare our results. It's true.
Okay, thanks. Well, I can stop right now. I can stop here for the questions, and thanks again for the presentation and the answers to the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny, for this question.
Je sais pas comment on fait. D'accord. Ah, c'est sur le haut. Échappe. Non. C'est où, c'est ici? Sorry.
So clear, Mark, now you can ask a question, please.
Beautiful for the presentation. I really like this. The content is very clear. And I also like reading the thesis, which I felt was built very nicely from chapter 1, where basic building blocks were shown and derived. And these basic building blocks were used throughout the thesis, which I thought was a very nice construction. And actually, my first question also goes similar to some of the questions that Julie already asked, and has to do with this idea of improving the derivation of the differential of APSS surfaces, and then using that. So my question basically is, so in the first chapter, you showed the existing techniques to derive differential properties of APSS surfaces. And then you were using these differential properties throughout the thesis. And on the slide that you're showing now, you show that the newly derived version shows some better behavior for some synthetic inputs. Yeah, so if you exactly know the curvature and the surface is nice, then you, in the new technique gives you better results. And my question is this advantage showing in the later applications? Right? So, for example, in chapter 2, we could use any of these techniques to feed into your technique, and the question is, do you still see an advantage? I mean, which is the fastest method of these methods, and which is the best, which is the one giving you the best results? And basically, I could ask this question for all techniques used throughout the thesis. Are the advantages that you are showing on this slide also showing in the downstream applications?
Comment je remets le micro? Retour à la réunion? Okay. Yes, so I hope you are hearing me well. So yeah, we didn't tested all our algorithms with other curvature estimations. We only used our shape operator that we proposed. So yeah, the question is it really important to use such accurate shape operator? I think in extreme cases, it is important to have an accurate estimations. I'm thinking about the small tiles of the church, for instance. If we have a very smooth curvature estimation, we wouldn't get these specific planar parts that contains very few points. So this could be important to have, in this case, a very accurate curvature estimations. In overall, I agree that maybe it's not the, again, the persistence analysis at many scales is quite very robust. And maybe if we have a lower quality on curvatures, it wouldn't change so much the results. We also have plenty of curvature estimations that are quite good enough. So yeah, it's not the most important part, but in extreme case, I guess that it still remains important.
Okay, and then my next question is kind of structurally very similar. Then in chapter 2, you were showing that persistence is an interesting concept or a useful concept for robustly estimating segmentations and other properties. So my question would be, why not use persistence for the problems that you are tackling in later chapters? Yeah, so for example, you are segmenting the shape into tubular regions. Wouldn't persistence help you there as well? Or instead of a voting scheme for extracting some lines, is there a way to apply persistence as well?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something to test. So to be honest, we first worked on cylinders extraction and curve extraction, and then we proposed these tools and persistence analysis. So yeah, the perspective I proposed at the end of the presentation was to use mainly persistence analysis for the extraction of cylinders and curves. I think yeah, the pipeline for cylinder detection that I proposed gives us cylindrical segmentations that could replace this part on planar segmentations, and we can run all this pipeline in the same way. So this is something to test. For curve detection, it's also something we could test. Again, we have individual curves on the input shape. So we didn't try it at multiple scale, but still we could also use it in this pipeline. It's something to test in future work. Yeah.
Okay, and then maybe about the parameterization method in the end. So this basically, my understanding is this the flow that is defined there goes to a sphere, or in a special case to a plane, because the primitive you're fitting locally is a sphere or a plane. Right? So the question is, do you think this would work more or less out of the box if I replace as a fitting primitive the sphere with other primitives that I fit locally? So for example, if we put in quadrics there as a local primitive for fitting, would this potentially go to an ellipsoid or hyperboloid and so on?
Yeah, this is also something to test. I think, yeah, if we fit cylinders, for instance, we will converge eventually toward a cylinder. And maybe it will reduce also the distortions induced and so on. I think we can fit ellipsoids using the algebraic constant surfaces approach with some slight changes. And it's something, yeah, I wanted to test. It will allow us, yeah, to maybe decrease the distortions. But yeah, I think we could converge toward an ellipsoid, for instance, a cylinder or such shapes. Then for other, for more complex shape, could be more complex. I'm thinking about how to say, if we fit donuts to the points. I'm not sure we will converge toward a genus 1 shape, but this is something to test. Also, yeah, some details. The great advantage of APSS is that it's also fast to compute, and so we could have a reasonable algorithm to parameterize. So if the fitting process is stable enough and fast enough, it could be great to use it to converge toward other domains.
So just an additional question in this direction. So I guess, I mean, for APSS, one advantage is that it's so fast if you have points and normals. Another reason I think for not fitting quadrics is that if you fit to general quadrics, it's difficult to avoid two-sheet solutions. I mean, in general, quadrics could have two sheets, and often you don't want to fit your point set locally to a solution that has two sheets because you're thinking that locally it's a surface. So you usually want to fit to a quadric with one sheet. And this could be, I mean, problems like this that have topological changes in your local fitting, I think that could be difficult in this problem right here. If you say you have a flow and you want to flow to something that's not necessarily a sphere, then how to exclude such solutions? And I think the primitive you mentioned, so let's say a class of primitives that includes a torus. I'm not sure how you can solve the problem that locally the topology fitting the surface could change, and that could happen while the flow goes to smoother and fluid shapes. So maybe you have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, we have to ensure that there's no topological changes, and but maybe we could detect such bad situations during the process. Because I also tested more complex point clouds where sometimes the point is flattened over itself. So a topological change also could happen. Maybe we can detect such situations, and why not removing the points that are failing, or saying, okay, this specific part is special, and we will use another maybe approach. I don't know. I was also thinking about, because thanks to the APSS, we have many features to characterize. We could also look at the residuals of the fit to be sure that the fitting is relevant or not. And if it's not relevant, maybe stop the progression there, continue at other place, and maybe do some specific operations depending on bad cases.
Thank you. Thank you for the answers. So for the moment, that would be my questions.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So now, Mathieu, if you have some questions.
Sure. Hello. So first of all, thank you so much for both the document and the presentation. In the document, I really like the fact that it's very systematically always, almost, at every chapter you were describing the key ideas first, and then you were going into the details. That makes it much easier to read, so I really enjoyed that. So the whole document was very easy to read, well motivated, well argued for most of the points that you were proposing. You were talking about the pros and the cons compared to the existing work, so that's very nice. It's well articulated. I believe that Mark mentioned that before, meaning that you're constructing things on top of each other. So that's also very nice when you read, because you feel like, okay, I think I get it, because what I understood from the previous chapter, you're now using it. So it was it made for a very nice read. And the presentation almost was, well, summarizing the whole document. You didn't go into some of the details that you provide in the document, of course, but you did a great job at summarizing the whole thing. So thanks for that. So few questions. I don't know where to start, because between Mark and Julie, we already took some of my questions, so I need to think about how to reorganize. There are some parts of the document where you talk about potential extensions, and you actually perform the extensions on one or two examples. So I was thinking about the figure 2.10, where you grow the point cloud coverage so that you can do a better visualization of the planar parts that you found. Do you see the example that I'm talking about? You basically grow the region by putting a threshold where you say, okay, within 20% I'm going to accept the point, and 20% for something, and then 45% for the angle. So you were extending the points that were belonging to your segment. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I see exactly what you mean. So yeah, one issue with the progressive smoothing that we propose on the planar segmentation is that we the coverage we obtained was quite low compared to other approaches, especially near the edges of the planar shapes. So in the figure you are mentioning, we tried also to grow the resulting regions to increase the coverage and get something with better coverage. This was more or less an heuristic, like we already have the regions, and we simply grow them with threshold on normals and distances. But yeah, it was to improve a bit the results, to have something more meaningful.
How sensitive these thresholds are? Meaning, did you actually have to play for 10 minutes before you did this, or as soon as you put, some, let's say, sensitive thresholds, it immediately gave you something much better? Maybe not perfect, but already much better.
It was no, it was quite fast to set, if I remember, for different reasons. First, the regions we extract, we know the range of scale where they live. So we know also, we have an intuition behind the size we can require to grow the regions, for instance. And we wanted also to have a very conservative threshold to be sure that the region don't overlap and so on. So we choose very low thresholds to obtain better results in any case.
45%, not that low, but yeah, I guess. Okay, so thank you for that. Other questions for your parametrization part. What is the effect of the presence of a boundary? Because you don't really show examples where there are boundaries. I believe the Lawrence Church has a boundary at the very bottom, right? There's nothing at the bottom. But I wanted to see the effect on boundaries like T and there, and how the flow is affected by the boundary, because there's always problems with the flow near boundary because points can slip and really change the shape in the process. So can you have you experimented a little bit on different types of holes?
Yeah, actually we have many holes. So not really here, but all the buildings I processed are empty at the bottom. And for instance, if we, I don't know if we can see, but here there is some missing data in this roof. So we have a hole that looks like a triangle here near the mouse. And we can see it here on the flattened version of the point on the sphere, where we also have this hole here, also as a triangular shape. So actually, I didn't encounter any problem with boundaries. The APSS actually project the points on the boundaries quite well, so no specific problems. Here we can guess that there is the sphere is not completely full. There is a large hole at the bottom that corresponds to the bottom of the building. So no specific problems about it. It was, by the way, a good way to then project this spherical parameterization on the planes by using a stereographic projection. And thanks to the hole at the bottom, we can flatten it very easily. So for buildings, yeah, it was almost convenient. But no, I didn't encounter any problem with boundaries. It's very well handled by the APSS. Yeah.
I'm always afraid of boundaries. Okay. And of course, as I was reading this parameterization part, I just wanted to see an example of the double torus or something, to see where it's converging for. So I really recommend you do that, just at least for your own curiosity. One thing about the parameterization methods, you said that dimensionality reduction methods are slow. You said that in the document, and you also answered this to Julie, but are you sure, in the sense that there are dimension reduction methods out there where you can perform very simple local analysis in massively parallel way, because every neighborhood can be analyzed independently? And then the final stage is basically computing the largest eigenvalue or the smallest eigenvalue, depending on the methods. And very often, because it's a sparse matrix, just doing a parallel iteration of, let's say, 10 iterations is already fairly decent enough, even for very large point clouds. So I would definitely investigate a little bit there, because the advantage of having this dimensionality reduction approach is that at least you know what you're minimizing. Of course, what you're minimizing may not be what you really want in practice, right? So some of the functionals that this because it's a spectral method, really, you find an eigenvalue, an eigenvector. This eigenvector satisfies some kind of analytical properties that are sometimes not relevant for geometry, but at least you know what it is. Compared to a flow like this, where you show that it does a good job at preserving both the informality and the area distortion, but it's less clear what it really performs. I mean, you did an analysis from the how do you call this? If it was fine enough, etc., then you know that it's that flow with this H-cube thing. But in practice, when you get point clouds that are not that dense, it's unclear what you really get. Mm-hmm. So that was one comment about the point cloud. And then, if I look at your method, I had, by the way, the same question that Julie asked, but my question was slightly different. It was more like, one of the points that you did not argue for or against, you just stated it, was this Poisson sampling. You said, okay, we perform a Poisson sampling. You didn't really say why, you didn't say why it was a good thing, you didn't say what was the negative consequences. And I think Julie is right that Doing this personal sampling is a little bit suspicious because you're in a way forcing some kind of an isotropic subsampling, which really disregard anything in terms of the intrinsic geometry. But you also gain by doing this, right? Like you were saying, because it's a Poisson sampling, you're going to remove a lot of the irregularity of sampling. So I think in the document you could actually say that there is a potentially fundamental theoretical issue in using this, but there are many advantages. And in particular, I feel like you still get away with this Poisson sampling, subsampling, I should say, because your ratio between scales are not too large. And so you can get away with it and have no significant bad effects like both Julie or I would have expected from that. That's my feeling. I may be wrong, but this is something that you could actually argue directly in the thesis document because that's an interesting point. And more generally, if I look at your approach as a sort of a wavelet decomposition, right? You're really doing the subsampling, meaning the lazy wavelet type of analysis. And of course, a good question would be, would something a la Haar wavelets, meaning where each point is not really subsampled, but it's actually moved to some kind of an average locally. So it's kind of like a Haar wavelet where you do local averaging to perform the next, to find the next scale. I wonder if that would be okay, because with the, even with the sphere fitting, the least square aspects of it may actually not break anything in terms of the quality of reconstruction and analysis in general. But this is a very different game compared to just subsampling. So I understand that we lead to a lot of investigation and lots of work. But it would be interesting, truly from the scientific standpoint, to see if there's anything to be gained to do not just subsampling, but also local averaging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we have to keep in mind that we want less samples than at a low scale. But yeah, we could do averaging, but we must still subsample the point cloud to be fast enough at the highest scale, right?
I mean, the subsampling could be done again. You could do the Poisson sampling and then move the samples that you decided to some kind of a local average of the neighbors. I mean, there's many ways I could think to slightly modify your Poisson subsampling to implement something that would be argued to be like a Haar wavelet. But again, this is opening up a whole can of worms. So I'm not quite sure that you have either the time or the motivation to do that. But I was just mentioning it because right now you're doing this subsampling construction of the scales. And we know from the wavelet analysis point of view that it's not always the best thing to do.
Okay. Yeah, it could be a good idea. Yeah, when I work on this, I wanted to, on one part, smooth the shape with the APSS and so on, and on the other part, just subsample the initial points without changing them to be sure to analyze what I want to analyze, the input point clouds. But yeah, local averaging could be tested.
That's all I have for my question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, Julie or Mark, do you have another question to react?
I'm fine.
Yes, I'm fine too, please.
Okay, thank you. So, I give now the term of Nicolas Melado, the main advisor at the hypothesis. Not sure you have questions, but perhaps you can bring some comments in the work.
Thank you, Matthias. So I will not have questions today. So we spent 3 years working on this topics, so I think asked another question. I just wanted to say that, as you have seen, Tisbo has been working on several topics, And for all of these projects, they always illustrated a strong understanding of the practical and the scientific term. And something I really enjoy when working with people was this capability to make theoretical contribution and also at the same time to talk of practical and scalable systems that illustrates his work. And you know that software development is something which is very time consuming, and I think that people find a good balance, allowing to publish several papers in the venue, such as a Geograph. And I also want to mention his contribution to this learning-based classifiers, which have been recently accepted with major revision of Foundation on Graphs. So it's something else that has not been mentioned. So some context about some of the work that has been done today on the cylinder and the anisotropic shape detection. All of this has been done during master internship and the first year of PhD. So it was a long time ago, and that's why we don't have persistence analysis on this kind of thing. A few months ago, so Thibaut got his work on the extraction accepted as graphics, and after that, he decided to work on quantum parameterization. And so we organized a visit in Berlin, and unfortunately, so Thibaut was there, and there's a new player entering the game, and due to the COVID, this work on this project has been slowed down. And so, yeah. There's many things to do on this. Despite this difficulty, we feel that that's a preliminary work that open interest in some direction. To conclude, yeah, I would like to thank Thibaut for his work in 3 years and for the nice presentation today. It's not been easy to prepare all this due to the situation. We are all working remotely, so good. So Thibaut did it, I think it did well, and yeah, that's all I have to say today. And thank you for the debate for the question. It's been very interesting, and I hope we have the opportunity to discuss again all of this stuff.
Thank you, Nicolas. So now the turn is to Loïc Hart, who was official advisor of Thibaut, but scientifically, Thibaut was analyzed by Nicolas. Loïc, if you have something to
okay, so can you hear me? Yeah, I will talk. I know. Okay. So first of all, I would like to thank all the jury that unfortunately did not receive in Toulouse. We would have liked to, but for the reason we all know is not the case, but still. Thank you. Thanks a lot for your work, and thanks a lot for all the nice questions you asked to do during this distance. Well, obviously I don't have questions because I asked so many people during all these years. But I would say just a few words to complete what Nicolas already said. Thibaut is a very calm and quiet person. Somehow, I mean, he came on a project on point cloud, let's say something like 11 years after the first works and only works actually we did on point clouds in this group in Toulouse. That was done by Gaël Denebo between 2002 and 1 and 2006, something like that. And yeah, somehow he reminded me Gaël Denebo, who actually is a very calm and quiet person as well. And this is this kind of person when talking to, somehow you have the feeling that each word has a cost. So I guess that during the years we're doing better because Thibaut is maybe speaking more than Gaël was doing because we avoided the one word answer to the jury question, which is always good. But yeah, that was kind of common. So he's actually, Thibaut has this particularity to do always one thing after another. So basically, when you spend some time with him on the project and when talking about different things, you can expect several things to come at the following time, but there is always one thing arriving, but this thing is always a significant advance from the previous one. And I think that one of the advantages of this behavior is to be always very focused on his research. And he's basically, I think, he developed some quite large analysis skills and more specifically a deep understanding of the problems he was working on. And that's some good skills for researchers, I think. The project on the multi-scale plane detection has been started, I think, right at the beginning of the PhD. And it took actually 2 years, right? It was 2 hard years. It was completely new. And I think we spent months of going through different directions of exploration. And I would say that at the beginning, and I would say more than the half of them, they were dead ends. And at some point, I was afraid that Thibault got completely discouraged because after 2 years, I would say that we didn't have that much. But yeah, it was, I mean, Thibault basically never gave up. And he finally ended up with this, I would say, nice combinatorial multi-scale analysis, which we published at Geographic. And yeah, somehow, I think we finished during the deadline, right? We had the last final item during the deadline. That was quite an interesting project, but it was complicated, quite long, and I'm very happy that at the end we ended up with this nice solution. And basically, yeah, Thibault did a very, very good job on this. Yeah, and then we tried to work on something else, especially this parameterization project, and unfortunately we could not go very far. Yeah, that was basically most of it. I wanted to say that I had other things, but we already said it. So it's just enough. Just thank you, Thibault, for all this year. It was very nice to work with you. So you're going to leave us in, let's say, I think 1 month and a half now. And I hope that we have great end. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So now it's me to end these discussions. I will not ask questions today because reviewers and examiners are stolen my questions. And as I know less on this topic than the reviewers and examiners, I will have no question. But what I want to say is it was a great pleasure to welcome you, Thibault, in our team during these 3 years. And you were always able to answer some questions, to participate to the life of the team. So it was a good pleasure to have you in the STORM team in 3 years.
Thank you.
So, no questions?